from MyCupcakeAddiction, and on today's episode I'm going to be showing you how to make these gorgeous rainbow unicorn piñata cookies that actually poop stars. Kind of gross, but also kind of funny. Let's get started. To make your cookies you'll need a unicorn cookie cutter and also a small circle cookie cutter. I've got some star sprinkles and I've also got some scissors and a couple of Ziploc bags. You'll need some plain white flour just to roll out your cookie dough. I've also got some melted white chocolate, some Nutella, and I've got a double batch of our sugar cookie dough, so I will link to that recipe in the description box below. I've got a couple of spoons and I've got food colour pastes in all the colours of the rainbow, a knife, a rolling pin, and a baking tray lined with a little bit of baking paper. To begin with, you want to be working with your cookie dough at room temperature and you want to roll it so that it's kind of like an elephant trunk, a bit fatter at one end and a bit skinnier down the other end. Once you're happy with the size, you just want to cut even lengths of your cookie dough off, and you need 6 of those in total. Take a little bit of your food colour paste now and you want to add 1 colour to each of those smaller portions of cookie dough. Massage that colour all the way through until you've got 6 individually coloured portions of your cookie dough. Shape each of your coloured portions into like a long flat rectangle and wrap them in plastic wrap before popping them off into the fridge, but you can keep out one. I'm going to start with purple in the centre of mine, and that's going to be where we start with our cookie dough roll. So take your purple and just roll it between your hands into like a bit of a cylinder. Make sure that it's going to fit on your baking tray and just trim off the ends so that you've got a nice, neat, kind of a sausage of that purple cookie dough. Pop it onto your baking paper lined tray and get it as straight as you can before putting it into the freezer and letting that completely set. It should only take about 10-15 minutes. Once that first one's set, pull out your next smallest colour. So for me that's blue, and I should mention that centre cylinder, that's your smallest amount of colour. Whatever you colour the least of, that needs to be the centre. The next size up, we're just rolling that out into kind of like a long flat rectangle, and you're going to wrap that around your frozen piece of cookie central dough. I just used my knife just to trim it off and really just wrap it around. Use your fingers just to push it together so that you're making kind of like a purple sausage wrapped in a little blue blanket. Pop it back onto your little baking tray and back into the freezer for another 5 or 10 minutes to let that next layer set. Once your blue's set, I'm going to roll out my green, and exactly the same thing. We're really just wrapping it around that blue, smoothing it down, give it a little roll on the bench if you need to, and then move on to your yellow. You can use whatever colours you like here. This is just my suggested colour scheme for our rainbow unicorn cookies. Freezing in between each of those layers, wrapping your next largest layered colour of cookie dough all the way around until you reach that outer layer, which for me is going to be red. Now with your red layer, you may come up a tiny bit short on cookie dough like I did. If you do, don't stress. Put on whatever you can, and then any little offcuts that you trim off the ends, you can just stick those back in place, kind of like a bit of a jigsaw puzzle, and just roll them on so that you've got a relatively smooth kind of a cookie dough roll. Put that off into the freezer for about 6 hours and let it freeze rock solid before we come back to slice. Once it's frozen, just trim off any little rough ends so you've got a nice flat edge, and then you want to cut 2 quite thick, chunky cookies here. So just take a sharp knife and just cut straight down. It should be frozen solid enough that it doesn't bend them out of shape. Now you're going to need 2 of these chunks for each of your piñata cookies, and then I also did a couple of smaller ones to make my rainbows that match. For your little rainbows, it's as simple as taking one of those discs, use your knife and just cut it straight through the middle. Pop those off onto a baking tray and put them in a moderate oven for like 5 minutes, and you've got yourself some gorgeous little rainbow cookies. For your unicorns, sprinkle down a generous amount of that plain flour, and then you're going to roll out one of your little cookie discs. So these don't have to stay in that exact circular shape, and it does help to let them come down to room temperature for a little while before you start to roll them out. Once your dough's rolled out, make sure that your cookie cutter is actually going to fit on it, and I flipped mine, so I kind of mirror imaged them. So I cut 1 unicorn out of a good side and then 1 unicorn out of a bad side, so they're kind of reversing, looking at each other, and when I stick them together, I'm going to have both nice good sides. When you've cut him out, just use your knife just to poke out his little hooves and also his horn so that you're not tearing any of those off as you're removing from the cookie cutter. And then you want to take your little unicorn and pop him onto your baking paper lined baking tray. Take all of those scraps and offcuts now, and you don't want to blend these together too much because you're going to make like an ugly brown color. So I just kind of gathered them into the middle of the table and then pressed them down before rolling them out. Gives you like a tie-dyed rainbow effect, but these ones don't have to be such a lovely rainbow because they're only going to go in the center. This dough should be a touch thicker than the dough that you used for your first unicorns, and you want to cut out 2 unicorns and pop them onto a baking tray. I used the circle cutter just to cut out 3 little circles to make a groove in the middle of our unicorns. I didn't use a knife here because that's actually going to stretch your cookie dough. If you want the pooping stars effect, now's the time we have to cut a little bottom for your unicorn out of that center piece. So I just use a sharp knife and just cut out a little section big enough for those stars to pass through. You can see here my cookie dough actually came apart. Don't worry if this happens to you, especially with those centerpieces. We're going to glue all this back together again, so just bake them as is and we'll fix it when we stick them back together. Pop those all off into the oven and don't walk away. These cook really fast, about 5 to 7 minutes. I ended up having both of my centerpieces break, so like I said, don't worry if this happens to you. We're going to fix that. I'm giving you guys a couple of filling options. So for filling one, take some of your Nutella and just spoon it into that Ziploc bag. And then in your other Ziploc bag, you want to take some of your melted white chocolate. Snip the corner of your Ziploc bag with the melted white chocolate, just a very, very fine point. So you're fashioning a very small piping bag. And then we're going to glue our little unicorns back together. So you want to match them up as best as you can and make sure that you know what your good side and your bad side is. Take that centerpiece now, and I'm just applying a very small amount of that white chocolate all the way around the outside edges. Try not to go too close to the outside edges because you don't want it to seep out the sides. Stick down your little centerpiece, or half a centerpiece as the case may be, and then just position it so that your little hooves and your little horns all match up. Do that with both of your piñata cookies. Now, for one of them, I'm going to insert the stars. This is the one that we cut the little bottom out of. So I'm going to put in quite a generous amount of those little star sprinkles all into that little cavity in the center of him. Once it's all full of stars, use a Ziploc bag again just to trace another fine chocolate line, but don't put any around the back where his bottom is, and then flip it and stick it on top to seal all of those stars inside and give your unicorn his front. If the idea of the unicorn pooping stars turns your stomach, you can also just use something like Nutella. You can use a frosting, anything you like to fill that central cavity, and once again, just trace your white chocolate all the way around the outside edge as thin as you can and use that to seal in my case, Nutella. So there you've got your gorgeous little unicorn piñata cookies with a surprise inside in the form of pooping stars. I hope you guys have enjoyed this tutorial. Make sure that you check out my other unicorn and rainbow themed things. If you haven't already subscribed to My Cupcake Addiction, make sure you do for new videos every week. And as always, thanks very much for watching.